Hello, everyone. This week we're focused on active transportation, and we've had a number of guest speakers contribute to this topic, and we're pleased to have with us today Sue Shikaze from the Health Unit in the City of Kawartha Lakes. So welcome, Sue.
Welcome, or thanks. I'll actually just say that I'm in Haliburton.
Oh, Haliburton.
The Haliburton-Kawartha Pine Ridge District Health Unit, which does cover the county of Haliburton, the City of Kawartha Lakes, and Northumberland counties.
Oh, okay, well, that's great. That does make for a mouthful, doesn't it, with that,
yes,
that lengthy title. So thank you for joining us. And again, for folks to understand that health units exist across the province. Some are specific to a specific county or region, and others have a broader area such as yours. So as we look at the topic of active transportation, so first of all, I might ask you to say a little bit about your background, which I think people will find to be of interest, and then just tell us how you got interested in active transportation.
Sure. So I'm a health promoter at the HKPR District Health Unit and working, as I say, out of Haliburton County. We're based in the village of Haliburton, and I've been here for about 13 or 14 years now. And the focus of my work up until fairly recently was on creating healthy communities and healthy built environments. And a big part of that focus has been related to promoting, advocating for, and encouraging our municipalities to plan for active transportation as a way of encouraging more physical activity so that people would reduce their risk of chronic disease. So it sort of comes from a chronic disease prevention perspective. In other words, encouraging people to get out of their cars, walk a little bit more, bike a bit more, so that they get more physical activity into their activities of daily living. So that's kind of how it all started. And so I started here at the health unit back in 2005. And at that time, really nobody was talking about active transportation. I would say, there just wasn't really much going on in terms of community level conversation or within our municipal governments and councils. And so I began to work with a local community-based coalition called the Communities in Action Committee, which was made up of a small group of people from various sectors. We had myself from public health, we had somebody from economic development, a couple people from local trails groups, someone from the health sector initially, and just decided that we would focus on promoting active transportation as a way of encouraging physical activity that was accessible to everyone, because of course, there's sometimes limitations and barriers related to cost for people to participate in recreation. But with active transportation, anybody in theory can get out and walk or ride their bike somewhere, assuming that there's safe and convenient places for them to do it. So that's sort of how it all got started.
Yeah, and of course, within our course, we're focusing on a rural and small town. So we could go to the City of Toronto or the City of Brampton and look at active transportation and have a pretty good idea of what it might look like. If we think about it from the point of view of rural and small town, what specifically to you are some of the key issues and the key successes that we can have looking at active transportation in that rural and small town context?
Right. Well, so the other thing I should add is that when we started this work in 2005, as you say, all of the literature that we were looking at was based in urban environments. And so we were sort of, we felt like, okay, this is an opportunity for us to sort of blaze the trail, so to speak, of what does active transportation look like, or what could it look like in a small and rural environment? Because just to give you a bit of context, Haliburton County is very rural. We have two small villages that are like a block long each, roughly, with 2,500 to 3,500 people in each one. People generally drive everywhere. So I would say that's one of the big barriers that we initially face and continue to face, is that there's a real ingrained rural car culture, because people generally have to drive because of the distance, right? It's we usually figure it's 20 to 25 kilometers really for people to get anywhere from where they live to work to school to shopping, all that kind of stuff. So that's certainly one challenge to overcome. And because even though people have to get in their cars to come to town to go shopping, then that car mentality sort of translates even when they're in town. So you'll see people, they'll be at the post office getting their mail, and then they'll get in their car to drive around the corner to go to the grocery store. And then they'll get in their car to drive a little bit further to go to get their bottle of wine at the liquor store. So what we one of the things that we did early on is we decided to focus on what would be a realistic message for a rural community. So we know that most people probably aren't going to ride their bike 20 kilometers or even walk a couple of kilometers if they're just a little bit outside of town. So our message initially was park the car and get moving. So once you get to town, you have to drive, but park your car and walk to do your errands, which we felt was, for a small rural area, a realistic message to begin with. So that's kind of how our promotion started.
And I'd just say that's a great spot to start from, isn't it? Because people in a rural community do drive into town, and even the farmers out in the countryside, right? Of course, people are driving to town. They're getting their services met all the way from the grocery store through to the hardware store to whatever else they might be looking for. And you're right, people do have that tendency to get in their car and drive, a couple hundred meters so they don't have to go back and find their car. Whereas if you have pleasant walking spaces, you can really enhance, I think, activity just in that process on its own.
Yeah. And I mean, the great thing about a small town is once you're there, it is very concentrated. It tends to be very concentrated. So, even if there hasn't been a lot of thought given to quote unquote active transportation planning, just the nature of it is things are pretty close together. There's a little hardware store on the corner, and then there's the grocery store around the corner, the post office. Everything's within walking distance, whereas in a larger urban area, things would tend to be a little bit more spread out. Mm-hmm. So certainly that's one barrier. I would say another challenge that we face is that rural areas, there's really large transportation networks, lots of roads to maintain, which is fairly costly, but pretty limited tax base to fund that. And certainly that's a challenge that we face here. And of course, municipalities across Ontario are faced with challenges related to downloading of services and all that kind of stuff. So I think having to, build new infrastructure for walking and cycling can be a challenge because there's just not a lot of money available to do that.
The population densities.
Yeah. So it's trying to sort of reframe. One of the things that we found helpful was to try to frame the message about active transportation, not only from a health perspective, which of course in public health is important, but to try to link it to other things that were priorities for our municipalities. So, in rural communities, they're often looking at economic development and how to attract and retain younger families, professionals, businesses, and that all has to do with what's the quality of life that you have to offer in your community, and what's going to make your small community stand out from any other number of small communities that a professional or family could choose to locate to. So I think there's lots of research that shows that people want places that are walkable, that are bikeable, that are safe for their children to get around in, or safe if they're aging. And certainly planning for active transportation contributes to that. So that's sort of the connection that we've tried to make with our local councils and staff, is that, look, this is not only about health, it's also contributing to making our communities more livable and desirable, so that it's easier to attract businesses and residents.
It's really important too. Of course, we have the health benefits, but also the economic development benefits. Well, if I might ask you, what would you say are some of your successes or some of your community successes that you've worked on or been part of?
Yeah, so over the years, we've done a whole variety of promotional things. We've sort of taken a top-down and bottom-up approach. In other words, I would say the bottom-up is the promotion and awareness raising at a community level of what is active transportation, why is it good to park your car and walk, why is it good to have a community that encourages that kind of activity. And the top-down piece would be the advocacy that we do with our municipalities in order to encourage them to develop policies and make investments to create those kinds of communities. So in terms of successes, I would say that we have an upper tier county and 4 lower tier municipalities, and all of their official plans now include policies related that actually, talk about active transportation, talk about walkability, making connections for walking and cycling. So of course that's a really good first step, because if you've got that kind of land use policy in place, then the corresponding bylaws and development kinds of decisions have to reflect what's in those policies. So that's that top-down piece.
Haliburton County?
Yes.
Yeah, so if students wanted to look at those official plans, they would be on the Haliburton County website.
Yep.
To have a look at it in terms of the policies related to
Yeah, so it's the County of Haliburton, and then the 4 municipalities would be Dysart et al., Algonquin Highlands, Minden Hills, and Highlands East, and their OPs are all online. And yeah, you could do a search for active transportation in the document and find some pieces in there for sure. And I would say that that's a direct result of the work that the Communities in Action Committee has done to advocate for those policies. And then, following that, we now see some infrastructure changes as well. So in both the villages of Haliburton and Minden, significant resources, financial resources, have been invested in making those downtowns more walkable. Things like widening sidewalks, building curb build outs so that that the street crossings are shorter, making street crossings more prominent, like better line painting, better street lighting, street furniture, that whole thing that just makes the streetscape more pleasant for people to walk around in. And then at the county level, excuse me, they now have a practice of paving a 1 meter wide shoulder whenever they're doing like a complete road overhaul. So, since probably 2006, we've seen the addition of, I would say, about 50 kilometers of paved shoulder, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it is significant considering that, we're doing it incrementally, and they, the county will maybe do 10 or 12 kilometers of road per year. It does add up, and we're seeing more cyclists. For tourism, I guess that's the other priority that I would say this work links to is tourism, because we have a real tourism-based economy. So those would be some successes, and then culminating in that would be an initiative that happened back in about 2016, where the Communities in Action Committee did a study on a section of a county road that's right outside the village of Haliburton, and is seeing some significant development in terms of not just commercial development, but there's also some affordable housing out to the west of the village. And so we wanted to look at how people move around on that. It's about a 3 kilometer stretch of road, and how it could be made more active transportation friendly. So we did a whole study and presented that to the county. And then sort of in parallel to that, the county had been looking at what development would look like along that stretch of road, recognizing that they're seeing more commercial development applications and that kind of thing. So they actually hired a consultant to do a corridor study. The consultant made use of the plan that we had done and came up with really a complete streets plan for that stretch of road. And so we were really excited to see the actual words complete streets in the corridor study, and a road cross section recommended that looks at not just vehicular traffic but also walking and cycling. So that's a plan that's still it's at its very early stages of implementation, but it was really encouraging for us to have been able to contribute some of our work to that, and also to see active transportation and complete streets integrated into that. Because I think eventually, if the county and municipality are able to sort of come together and implement the recommendations of that plan, it will be a real example for other rural communities, because what it is it's a main road. It's currently a county road that's beginning to function more like a street. In other words, having more destinations, not just a through road anymore. And I think that's a situation that lots of rural communities find themselves in, where, okay, we're this little town that there's a major road or highway that goes through, but there's also people that use the space, right? Not just vehicles.
Mm-hmm. Those are all fantastic ideas. I was quite taken as well by the 1 meter pavement on the side of the roads, because I think we're often challenged. We can figure out what to do in our towns and villages, but we're often challenged what to do in the rural countryside, where the population density is that much less again, and that's certainly a step forward in that direction. Is there anything else you'd like to add, Sue, to bring to the attention of the students? I will mention that they are being asked to do an active transportation plan as part of their course. You'll be interested. A few years ago, I did a sort of 10 steps take action in Huron County in terms of how you could do this in a small community where you don't often have the resources. And so anyway, students are being asked to look at a city block or a town block or a small village and try to apply some of those principles. So any key messages you would like to give for students as we near conclusion here?
Sure. Well, first I would say that there's a few points. One is that in a rural community, and probably in any community, sometimes change can be slow, and you're trying to shift attitudes and increase awareness and that kind of thing. So it's important to acknowledge the small steps and the small pieces that contribute to the greater towards the greater goal, and to celebrate those small successes. I think that's really important because it is incremental. That partner in this work, that we're we're mandated to work with municipalities and to develop healthy communities and healthy built environments. So we play an important role. And sort of to your point about rural communities and active transportation plans and that sort of thing. And one of the challenges is that small rural communities often will likely not have an active transportation coordinator like a city would, So they might, if you're lucky, they've got a full-time planner, but that person's work is probably not gonna that person's probably not going to have a lot of time to focus specifically on active transportation. So to have groups in the community like public health and like the Communities in Action Committee to do a lot of the legwork. I mean, it was actually the Communities in Action Committee that created active transportation plans for the village of Haliburton and the village of Minden. We got the funding, we engaged the consultant, we did the community consultations and put the plan together. And, we engaged the municipality throughout that process, but it was actually an external document that was developed and then given to the municipality, which they then could make use of and incorporate into their planning processes. So, I think in a rural community, it's important to look at all the range of strengths and resources that are available, and that planning for something like active transportation doesn't necessarily have to have its reside solely within the municipality, that there's other partners that can contribute and help make things happen.
Well, those are fantastic messages, Sue, and we want to thank you for contributing to our course and wish you all the best in the future. And again, I'll just say, Sue Shikaze, I'm going to ask you to repeat the health unit's name because it's long. So it's the Haliburton Kawartha Pine Ridge District Health Unit. And if any students ever want to get in touch to find out more info, I'd be happy to chat. Well, thank you again, and I wish you all the best.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.